They said the king had gone mad. They said he was tearing the kingdom apart looking for a ghost. Selene touched the gentle swell of her belly and knew the truth. She wasn't a ghost, not yet, but she was the cause of his madness. The hollow ache in her own soul was a constant, echoing thrum of his, a phantom limb of a bond that had been brutally, unnaturally severed. Here, in this quiet, forgotten village at the edge of the Blackwood, she was just Ilara, a war widow with a quiet sorrow in her eyes. No one knew she was Selene, the woman who should have been queen. No one knew she carried the twin heirs of the Wolf King, Alaric. The mark on her hip, once a delicate silver swirl that promised a fated love, now burned like a brand. It was a symptom of the bond sickness, a malady so rare it was spoken of only in whispers by the oldest pack healers. It happened when a true mate bond was denied, poisoned, or otherwise broken by dark means. For her, it was a constant low-grade fever and an emptiness that felt like a cavern in her chest. For Alaric, an alpha of his immense power, it was a descent into feral madness. She felt it in the tremors of the earth, in the mournful howl of distant wolves, in the frantic, desperate pull of his soul searching for hers. He was a storm raging on the horizon, and she was the lost eye of it, praying he never found her. Because if he found her, so would they. 6 months. It had been 6 agonizing months since the great hall had glittered with anticipation for the choosing ceremony. The air had been thick with the scent of pine from the Yule wreaths and the rich aroma of spiced wine. Selene had stood near the hearth, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She and Alaric had been inseparable since childhood. Their souls had recognized each other long before the magic of the moon was meant to confirm it. He would catch her scent, moon lilies and winter frost, across a crowded courtyard, and his golden eyes would find her, a private smile gracing his lips. Everyone knew. It was a foregone conclusion. She was a daughter of a minor house, true, but her spirit was strong, and Alaric, the newly crowned Alpha King, loved her. He had told her so the night before, his voice a low rumble against her ear, his hand resting possessively on her waist. "Tomorrow," he had promised, "the whole world will know you are mine." But tomorrow had been a nightmare. She watched from the shadows as he mounted the dais, his jaw tight, his eyes clouded with a strange confusion she had never seen before. He scanned the crowd, a flicker of panic in his gaze, as if searching for something he couldn't name. Then Lord Vane, the ambitious head of House Van Thorn, stepped forward and placed a hand on Alaric's shoulder, murmuring something in his ear. Alaric swayed, blinking slowly. When he spoke, his voice was flat, devoid of the warmth she cherished. He announced his fated mate was not Selene, but Lysara Van Thorn. A collective gasp had swept the hall. Lysara, smug and triumphant in her gown of silver silk, glided to his side. Selene felt the world tilt. The bond, which had been singing with joyful anticipation, screamed. It felt like a physical tearing inside her, a white-hot agony that stole her breath. She saw Alaric flinch, a hand flying to his chest, as if he too felt the echo of that spiritual violence. But his eyes were still dull, his expression blank. Lysara took his hand, her painted smile a mask of victory. Selene, her heart shattering into a million pieces, fled. She ran from the castle, from the city, from the life she thought was hers. She didn't stop until she collapsed in the arms of Marta, the old pack healer who had been a second mother to her. It was Marta who saw the truth, who smelled the faint, venomous trace of a rare wolfsbane compound on the collar of the dress Selene had worn. A poison designed not to kill, but to cloud the mind and sever the delicate threads of a forming mate bond. It was Marta who, weeks later, confirmed the other secret Selene carried. She was pregnant. Not with one child, but two. Now, every whisper from the capital that reached her remote sanctuary was a new twist of the knife. King Alaric had become a tyrant. He executed guards for perceived slights, tore tapestries from the walls, screaming a name no one could understand, and stalked the castle halls in his massive black wolf form, his eyes no longer molten gold, but burning pits of feral rage. Lysara, the so-called queen, could not soothe him. His wolf snarled and snapped if she came near, the animal instinct rejecting the falsehood, even if the man's mind was too poisoned to see it. The kingdom was bleeding, ruled by the machinations of House Van Thorn, while its true king was lost in a fog of grief and magical poison. Selene wrapped her arms around her belly, a fierce, protective gesture. Her twins were all that mattered. They were the last pure piece of the love she and Alaric had shared. The assassins Lord Vane would inevitably send to eliminate the true bloodline could not find them. So she endured the burning mark, the hollow ache, the terrifying echoes of her mate's descent into madness. She hid, she prayed, and she waited for the storm to either pass or consume her whole. Tonight, the ache was worse than ever. A primal scream echoed through the frayed connection, so potent it brought her to her knees on the cold stone floor of her cottage. He was close, or he was breaking completely. She didn't know which was more terrifying. The cottage door, her only shield against the world, suddenly felt as fragile as glass. The hunters were coming. She could feel it in her bones. The man who was once her king was a prisoner in his own skin. Alaric prowled the battlements of his castle, the cold stone doing nothing to soothe the fire in his blood. 6 months of this torment. 6 months of a gaping wound in his soul that no one could see and no healer could mend. His memory of that night, the choosing ceremony, was a tattered cloth full of holes. He remembered the anticipation, the certainty. He remembered the scent of moon lilies, her scent. But he could not conjure her face, he could not speak her name. It was a word trapped behind his teeth, a phantom on his tongue. Then there was only the fog, a dull, throbbing haze, and the cloying, sweet perfume of Lysara Van Thorn. He'd woken 3 days after the ceremony in his chambers, Lysara sleeping in a chair nearby, his head feeling like it had been split by an axe. They told him he had chosen her. They showed him the royal proclamations. They called her his queen. But his wolf, the ancient spirit that lived within him, knew it was a lie. The beast raged against the bars of his consciousness, snarling at the scent of the woman who claimed him, refusing her touch, rejecting the falsehood with a violence that terrified the court. His alpha senses, usually so sharp, were blunted by a constant, agonizing hum. It was a signal without a source, a cry in a language he almost understood. It drove him to fits of rage, to long, desperate hunts in the royal forests, where he would run in his wolf form until his paws bled and his lungs burned, chasing a scent he could never quite catch. Moon lilies and winter frost. It haunted his dreams, the only solace in his waking nightmare. He was looking for a ghost, a memory, a part of himself that had been stolen. "My king," a silken voice interrupted his torment. Lysara stood behind him, wrapped in furs, her expression a careful mixture of concern and possession. "You will catch a chill. Come inside, let me warm you." Alaric turned, and the beast within him rose. A low growl rumbled in his chest, his golden eyes flashing with feral light. "Do not touch me," he snarled, the words more animal than human. Lysara flinched, her mask of sympathy slipping to reveal a flicker of pure venom. "Alaric, this madness must end. The pack elders are whispering. Your father would be ashamed. You are the Alpha King, not some feral stray." I am your mate, your queen." "You are nothing," he spat, the words torn from the deepest, most honest part of his soul. The bond sickness, the searing agony of separation from his true mate, was the only thing that felt real. He felt a phantom pain, a burn on his hip that mirrored the mark he knew his real mate must bear. The lie of Lysara's presence was an insult to that sacred pain. "Leave me!" She recoiled as if struck, her face paling with fury. "You will regret this, Alaric. You cannot rule a kingdom when you cannot even rule your own mind. My father—" "Your father," Alaric interrupted, stepping closer, his sheer size and power making her take an involuntary step back, "is the only reason you still draw breath in this castle. Now get out of my sight before I forget he is your protector." She turned and fled, her haughty facade crumbling. Alaric was left alone again with the howling void inside him. But this time, something was different. The constant, agonizing hum had sharpened, just for a moment, into a clear note of terror. Not his own, but hers. The ghost's. The woman whose name he couldn't speak. His wolf threw its head back and let out a howl that shattered the stillness of the night. A sound not of madness, but of pure, desperate longing. He didn't know who he was calling for, but his soul knew. And it knew she was in danger. His most loyal beta, Brennan, heard the howl. An old soldier, Brennan had served Alaric's father and had known Alaric since he was a pup. He had watched the young, vibrant prince descend into this tortured state, and unlike the sycophants of House Van Thorn, he did not believe it was mere madness. He believed it was a curse. He had seen the way Alaric looked at Selena before the ceremony. He had seen the way Selena had vanished without a trace, and he smelled the lies that clung to Lysara Van Thorn like a cheap perfume. While the court schemed, Brennan had been investigating. He'd done it in secret, using old contacts and forgotten pathways. He'd found the stable boy who saw Selena flee that night, her face pale with a grief so profound it had shaken him. He'd found a merchant who'd sold a horse to a frantic old woman, Marta, the healer, who was traveling with a heartbroken younger woman wrapped in a heavy cloak. The trail was thin, months old, but it was a thread. And Alaric's howl, that sound of pure, unadulterated agony and urgency, told Brennan to pull on that thread now, with all his might. He bypassed the authority of Lord Vane, the acting regent, saddled his own horse, and rode out from the capital under the cover of darkness. He was looking for a ghost, too. But he had her name, Selene. In the small village of Oakhaven, Selene jolted upright in her bed, a hand pressed to her chest. The echo of Alaric's howl vibrated in her very bones. It was closer than it had ever been. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the bond sickness flaring with the proximity. The twins in her womb stirred restlessly, as if they too felt the call of their sire. Marta rushed in from the next room, her weathered face etched with worry. "What is it, child?" she asked, her hand cool on Selene's feverish forehead. "He's coming," Selene whispered, her voice trembling. "Or he's dying. I can't tell the difference." "Neither is good for us," Marta said grimly. "If he finds you in this state, his rage will level this village. If he dies, the bond will shatter completely. It could kill you and the babies." She began gathering herbs, her movements swift and practical. "We need to strengthen the shielding spells on the cottage. We need more time." But time had just run out. A heavy fist pounded on the door, a sound that made both women freeze. It wasn't the knock of a curious neighbor. It was hard, official, demanding. Marta gestured for Selene to hide in the small bedroom, her eyes wide with fear. She crept to the door, a heavy iron poker in her hand. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice thin. A familiar voice answered, low and urgent. "Marta, "It's Brennan. For the love of the moon, open the door. I'm alone." Relief and a fresh wave of fear warred in Marta's chest. Brennan was Alaric's baiter, a man of honor. But his presence meant the secret was out. She unbolted the door and pulled him inside, quickly shutting it behind him. The old wolf looked exhausted, his face grim. His eyes immediately scanned the small cottage, and when they fell on the doorway to the bedroom where Selena was hiding, his expression softened with a terrible sadness. "She is here," he stated, not a question. "I followed a trail a blind man could have missed if he knew what to look for. Lord Vane's spies are not so sentimental. They are likely a day behind me, or less." Selena stepped out of the bedroom, her chin held high, though her hands were trembling. She wrapped a protective arm over her belly. Brennan's gaze dropped to the swell of her abdomen, and his breath hitched. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. The king's madness, the stolen mate, the hidden heir. "My queen," he breathed, dropping to one knee, his head bowed in deference. The title, one she had never been granted, sounded strange, and yet perfectly right. "There is no queen here, Brennan," Selene said, her voice thick with emotion. "Only a woman trying to protect her children." "They are the king's children," Brennan said, his voice choked. "He is destroying himself, Selene. He is dying from the inside out, looking for you. He doesn't remember your name, the poison saw to that, but his soul has not forgotten. This bond sickness, it will kill him." Before she could answer, the night was shattered by the whistle of a crossbow bolt. It flew through the window, missing Brennan's head by an inch, and embedding itself deep in the wooden wall behind him. A sickly green fluid dripped from its tip. Poison. "They're here," Brennan snarled, leaping to his feet and drawing his sword. "Get back!" The cottage door exploded inward, splintering into 1,000 pieces. 3 figures clad in black leather, their faces hidden by masks, stood silhouetted against the night. The sigil of House Van Thorn, a coiled serpent, was embossed on their armor. They raised their crossbows, the moonlight glinting on the poisoned tips of their bolts. They weren't there to talk. They were there to erase a bloodline. Brennan met them with a roar, his sword a blur of silver. He was a seasoned warrior, one of the best, but he was outnumbered. He parried a strike, disarmed one assassin, but another fired his crossbow. The bolt struck Brennan in the shoulder, and he cried out, stumbling back. The poison was fast-acting. His movements immediately became sluggish. Marta tried to drag him back, to shield him, but one of the assassins simply shoved her aside, sending the old woman crashing into a table. Selene watched in horror as the lead assassin stepped over Brennan's fallen form. His cold, dark eyes fixed on her, specifically on her pregnant belly. He raised his crossbow, taking aim. There was nowhere to run. This was it. The end of her line. The end of Alaric's legacy. She closed her eyes, clutching her stomach, and sent a single desperate thought down the frayed thread of the bond. "Alaric, forgive me." In that same instant, a sound unlike any other ripped through the night. It was not a man's shout or a wolf's howl, but something in between. A roar of pure, world-breaking fury. The entire back wall of the cottage disintegrated. Wood, stone, and plaster exploded outward as a creature of nightmare and legend burst through. A wolf of impossible size, its fur the color of a starless midnight, its eyes burning with the light of molten gold. It was Alaric. He was no longer a king or a man. He was a feral alpha, a force of nature answering the call of his mate. The assassins froze, their professional calm shattered by the sheer primal terror of the being before them. The massive black wolf was a blur of motion. It lunged, its jaws clamping around the neck of the assassin aiming at Selene. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and the man fell, his crossbow clattering to the floor. The other two turned to fight, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Alaric was not fighting, he was executing. He tore through them with claws like daggers and teeth that could shear through steel. The fight was over in seconds. The small cottage was a scene of utter carnage, the air thick with the scent of blood and the wolf's overpowering musk of pine and winter. The great beast stood amidst the ruin, its chest heaving, its golden eyes wild with the aftermath of battle. Then its gaze fell upon Selene. The feral rage began to recede, replaced by a dawning, heart-wrenching confusion. He took a hesitant step toward her, then another. The massive wolf began to shrink, bones cracking and reshaping in a sickeningly fast transformation. Where the monster had stood, now knelt the man, Alaric. He was naked, covered in the dust of travel and the blood of his enemies. His hair was matted, his face gaunt. But his eyes, those golden eyes, were fixed on her with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. "You," he whispered, the single word filled with a universe of pain, confusion, and dawning recognition. "You are real." He crawled toward her, oblivious to the splinters and the blood on the floor. His eyes, which had been lost in a fog for so long, were clearing, seeing her for the first time in 6 months. The scent of moon lilies and winter frost filled his senses, a healing balm to his ravaged mind. "Selene," he breathed, and the name, finally spoken, was like a key turning in the lock of his memory. He reached her, his body trembling. He didn't touch her face or her hands. His gaze dropped to her stomach, to the impossible, beautiful swell of her pregnancy. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The bond, which had been a frayed thread, roared back to life, a conduit of pure, searing energy that slammed into them both. The burning mark on Selene's hip flared with a heat so intense it was almost painful, but it was a healing fire, purging the sickness. She felt his own mark ignite in unison. He fell to his knees in the smoking ruin of her little cottage. His trembling hand hovered over her stomach. "May I?" he whispered, his voice raw, broken. Selene could only nod, tears streaming down her face. When he touched her, his large, calloused hand spreading reverently over the curve of her belly, the twins kicked, a sudden, violent series of thumps against his palm, as if recognizing the presence of their sire. And the Alpha King, the mad tyrant who had torn his kingdom apart, wept. He pressed his forehead to her stomach and sobbed, great shuddering gasps of grief, relief, and a love so profound it was terrifying. "I tore the world apart for you," he choked out, his voice muffled against her dress. "They told me you were a ghost, a fever dream. But I knew. My soul knew." He looked up at her, his golden eyes swimming with tears, the madness finally, blessedly gone, replaced by a clarity and purpose that was breathtaking to behold. "They will pay," he vowed, his voice dropping to a low, lethal growl. "For what they did to you, for what they did to us. I will burn their world to ash." The story of Selene and Alaric is a testament to the unbreakable power of a true mate bond. Their journey was just beginning, a path of reclamation and justice that would reshape their world. If you've ever felt a connection so deep it feels like destiny, you know that nothing can truly keep two fated souls apart. We love bringing these epic tales of love and power to you. If you're enjoying this story, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more paranormal romance that will get your heart pounding. Now, let's see how a king reclaims his throne and a hidden mother becomes a queen. The immediate aftermath was a blur of controlled chaos. While Alaric held Selene, his entire being focused on her and the life she carried, Brennan, despite the poison burning in his veins, staggered to his feet. "My king," he gasped. "Marta is injured." Alaric's head snapped up. His focus shifted, the loving mate replaced in an instant by the Alpha King. He gently released Selene and moved to the old healer's side. Marta was conscious, but her breathing was shallow, a dark bruise forming on her temple where she had hit the table. "Brennan, the poison," Alaric noted, his eyes narrowing at the black veins spreading from the wound on his beta's shoulder. "It is nothing, my king. Securing the queen is all that matters," Brennan insisted, his loyalty absolute even as his knees buckled. "It is not nothing," Selene said, her voice stronger now, imbued with the renewed power of the bond. She knelt beside Marta, her hands hovering over the woman's head. She had always had a knack for healing, small things, soothing fevers, easing aches, but she had never tried anything like this. Yet instinct took over. She closed her eyes, drawing on the new, brilliant energy flooding her from the restored bond. A soft, silvery light began to emanate from her palms. It wasn't the brilliant, fiery gold of Alaric's alpha power, but something quieter, deeper. The light of the moon. The glow enveloped Marta's head. The old healer's breathing evened out, the pained lines on her face smoothing. After a moment, her eyes fluttered open, clear and sharp. She stared at Selena in awe. "The Moon Mother's gift," Marta whispered, her voice filled with reverence. "It is true. The legends are true." Alaric watched, his expression a mixture of shock and profound pride. He had always known Selena was special, but this was magic from the old tales, power not seen in generations. He turned his attention to Brennan. "Hold still," he commanded. He placed his hand over the crossbow wound. With a grimace, he snapped the shaft of the bolt. Then, with a sharp pull that made Brennan roar in pain, he ripped the poisoned head from his beta's shoulder. Black blood welled up. Alaric didn't hesitate. He lowered his head and bit down, sucking the poisoned blood from the wound. He spat the black fluid onto the floor, his own powerful constitution immune to the venom. He did this 3 times, until the blood that flowed was clean and red. "You will live, old friend," Alaric said, clapping a hand on Brennan's good shoulder. "Now talk to me. Who were they?" "House Van Thorn assassins, my king," Brennan reported, his strength already returning. "Their sigil was on the armor. Lord Vane must have discovered my departure. He's cleaning up loose ends." "He is not cleaning up anything," Alaric snarled, his eyes turning hard as granite. "He is digging his own grave." He stood and pulled on the spare trousers and tunic Brennan had packed on his horse, dressing quickly. The king was back. The feral madness was gone, reforged into a cold, sharp-edged fury. He looked at Selene, his gaze softening once more. "We cannot stay here. We ride for the capital. Now." "The capital?" Selene asked, her heart sinking. "Alaric, it's a viper's nest. Lysara and her father control the council, the city guard." "They control the puppets I left behind in my madness," he corrected her, his voice a low, confident rumble. "They do not control the pack, not the true pack." He walked to the broken doorway and looked out into the night. He took a deep breath and let out a single, sharp howl. It was not a cry of pain this time. It was a summons, an alpha's call to his own, echoing for miles through the ancient woods. An order, a declaration of war. Within the hour they were moving. Marta, now fully recovered, insisted on coming, her knowledge of the poison invaluable. Brennan, his arm bandaged, rode at Alaric's right, his sword sharp and his eyes scanning the trees. Selene was mounted on Alaric's own warhorse, a massive beast that seemed to sense the precious nature of its cargo. Alaric himself walked beside her, his hand resting on her leg, a constant grounding presence. He refused to ride, wanting his feet on the earth, his senses sharp, ready to meet any threat. As they traveled through the night, they talked. Selene told him of her flight, of the constant fear, of the sickness and the hollow ache. Alaric, in turn, described the fog in his mind, the phantom memories, the rage he couldn't control. "I did not choose her," Alaric roared, the memory of his own powerlessness making him slam a fist against a tree. The trunk shuddered, dropping leaves and twigs. "I would never choose her." That night, Lord Vane offered me a celebratory goblet of wine. I remember the taste was off, bitter. He said it was a special vintage from his family's private stock. I was drugged, poisoned. I woke up 3 days later screaming your name, Selene. But the word wouldn't come out. It was trapped. They told me I had chosen Lysara. And a part of my mind, the part they had poisoned, believed it. But my soul knew it was a lie. Marta, riding just behind them, nodded grimly. The serpent's kiss, an old Van Thorn recipe, a compound of wolfsbane, nightshade, and other darker things. It attacks the mind, creating false memories and suppressing the true mate bond. It's an abomination against pack law, against the moon goddess herself. The truth, ugly and venomous, settled between them. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a coup, a theft of the highest order. They had not just stolen Alaric's throne. They had tried to steal his very soul. By dawn, they were met on the road by the first of Alaric's loyalists. A dozen wolves from the Stone Creek pack, their alpha a grizzled old male who had been a close friend of Alaric's father. He had heard the alpha's call and answered without hesitation. He looked at Alaric, truly seeing his king for the first time in months. Then at Selena, her belly swollen with the future of their line. He and his wolves dropped into a low bow. "Alpha King," the old wolf said, his voice thick with emotion. "We answer the call." It was the beginning. As they marched toward the capital, their numbers grew. Alaric's summons, sent through the deep primal network of alpha wolves, had spread like wildfire. Packs that had been uneasy under Lord Vane's de facto rule now had a banner to rally to. They came from the mountains and the valleys, from the riverlands and the forests. Warriors, healers, elders, they saw their true king, his mind clear and his purpose absolute. They saw his queen, radiant even in her simple traveller's clothes, her hand resting on the future of the kingdom. And they saw the lie they had been living under for 6 long months. By the time they reached the outskirts of the capital city, their small, desperate party had become an army. An army built not on fear, but on loyalty and the sacredness of the true bond. The capital was in a state of high alert. Lord Vane, arrogant but not stupid, had realized his assassins had failed. He had sealed the city gates and doubled the guard, branding Alaric a feral madman and anyone with him a traitor. But his power was built on a foundation of lies, and it was beginning to crumble. The city guard was made up of pack members, and as rumors of Alaric's return with his true pregnant mate spread through the streets, their loyalty began to waver. Alaric did not lay siege to his own city. He walked to the main gate, his loyal packs arrayed behind him, a silent, powerful testament to his authority. Selene was at his side, her fear replaced by a cold, steady resolve. She was no longer just protecting her children. She was fighting for their birthright. "Lord Vane!" Alaric's voice boomed, amplified by his alpha power, rolling over the city walls like thunder. "You have hidden behind my throne for 6 months. You have poisoned your king and lied to your people. Your treason ends today. Open these gates, or I will tear them from their hinges." There was a long silence. Then, from the top of the wall, Lord Vane appeared, flanked by his personal guard and his daughter Lysara. Her face was a mask of pale fury. "The madman speaks," Vane called down, his voice laced with false bravado. "He has been corrupted by a peasant whore who carries his bastard. Do not listen to him. He is no longer your king." A low growl rumbled through the assembled packs. The insult to their queen did not sit well. "She is no whore," Alaric roared back, his voice shaking with protective rage. "She is Selene of House Silverwood, my chosen queen, mother of my heirs. And you, Vane, are a traitor and a poisoner. The pack will have justice." He needed to offer no more proof than Selene herself. The truth of their bond was a palpable thing, a golden light that seemed to shimmer in the air around them. Every wolf present could feel its power, its rightness. They could also feel the sour wrongness of the lie that had been forced upon them. The city guard on the walls looked at each other, their resolve shattering. With a great groan, the winches turned. The city gates began to lower. The people were choosing their true alpha. Lord Vane and Lysara watched in horror as their power evaporated. They fled from the wall, back toward the castle, their last bastion of authority. Alaric led his people into the city, not as a conqueror, but as a returning king. The streets were lined with pack members, their heads bowed in respect. They marched straight for the great hall, the site of the original betrayal. They found Vane and Lysara there, making their last stand. They had taken hostages, members of the court who had begun to question their rule, including several of the castle's healers. Lord Vane held a sword to the throat of a trembling council elder. "Stay back!" he shrieked, his composure gone. "I still have loyal men. We will kill them all!" "You have no one," Alaric said, his voice dangerously calm as he and his followers filled the hall. "It's over, Vane. Surrender now, and I may grant you a quick death." Lysara, however, was made of a more venomous substance than her father. Her eyes were fixed on Selene, burning with a hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. She saw her dream of being queen, her status, her power, all turning to dust because of this quiet, silver-haired girl. She had lost. But she could still inflict pain. "You think you've won, you little servant?" Lysara hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. She laughed, a high, unhinged sound that echoed in the tense hall. She called Selene pathetic and weak, a nobody who had gotten lucky. Then, her eyes landed on Selene's swollen belly, and a new, terrible idea lit her features. "If I can't have the throne," she screamed, her face contorting into a snarl of pure malice, "no whelp of yours will ever sit on it." In a flash of movement, Lysara shoved one of the hostages aside, revealing a small, sharp dagger she had concealed in her dress. She ignored Alaric, ignored her father, ignored the dozens of warriors surrounding her. With a final, desperate scream of rage, she lunged. Not at Alaric, not at an armed guard. She lunged directly at Selene, the dagger aimed squarely at the center of her pregnant stomach. Time seemed to slow down. Alaric roared and moved to intercept, but he was a fraction of a second too late. Brennan was too far away. There was no one who could stop her. But Selene was not helpless. The primal, earth-shattering threat to her unborn children ignited something within her, a power she never knew she possessed. A dormant magic, the legacy of her ancient bloodline, erupted. Pain exploded, not from the dagger, but from within. Every bone in her body felt like it was breaking and reforming. Golden light, brighter than the sun, flooded the room, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. A shockwave of pure energy blasted outward from her, sending Lysara flying backward, the dagger spinning from her grasp. Where Selene had stood, a creature of myth and legend now towered. A wolf. But not just any wolf. She was immense, larger even than Alaric in his feral state, her fur the color of pure, untainted snow, her eyes glowing with the amber fire of the harvest moon. Where Selene had stood, a white wolf now towered. The legendary white wolf. The Moon Mother incarnate, a being of immense power, said to appear only in times of greatest need. She didn't snarl or roar. She simply stood there, radiating an aura of calm, lethal authority that dwarfed even Alaric's alpha presence. She turned her massive head, her amber eyes fixing on Lysara, who lay whimpering on the floor. With a delicacy that belied her size, she caught the falling dagger with a clawed hand before it could clatter to the ground, her message clear. The threat was over. A collective gasp, a wave of pure reverence swept through the great hall. Every wolf, from Alaric to the lowliest Omega, instinctively dropped into a bow, their heads pressed to the floor. They were in the presence of a goddess. Terrified beyond measure, his last desperate gamble utterly annihilated by a power he couldn't comprehend, Lord Vane dropped his sword. It clattered loudly in the sudden silence. "I confess!" he screamed, falling to his knees, tears of terror carving paths through the grime on his face. "It was the poison, the serpent's kiss. It was all Lysara's idea. She wanted the throne. She forced me to do it. I confess to everything." His pathetic, blubbering confession, admitting to the poisoning within earshot of the entire pack council, sealed their fate. Lysara, still on the floor, stared up at the magnificent white wolf that was Selene, her mind finally, completely broken by the reality that she had not just underestimated a rival, she had attacked a deity. The usurper's reign had ended not with a bang, but with a whimper of terror in the face of true divine power. The silence in the great hall was absolute, broken only by Lord Vane's pathetic sobs. The magnificent white wolf Selene held the gaze of the assembled packs for a long moment, her amber eyes seeming to pierce each of their souls, judging their loyalty, their fear, their awe. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she turned her head and looked at Alaric. He was still on one knee, his head bowed, but he raised his eyes to meet hers. In his gaze there was no fear, only wonder, adoration, and a love that was as vast and profound as the night sky. With the same silent grace, the transformation reversed. The brilliant white fur receded, the massive form shrinking, the golden light softening until it was just Selene standing there once more, her simple dress unharmed, her hands resting protectively on her belly. She was breathing heavily, a fine sheen of sweat on her brow, but her eyes held a new strength, a regal authority that had been forged in the heart of the magical fire. The dormant power was now awake. Alaric rose to his feet and went to her side, his movements filled with a new kind of reverence. He didn't just see his mate, he saw his queen, in every sense of the word. He wrapped an arm around her, a gesture that was both protective and supportive. He faced the hall. "Seize them!" he commanded, his voice ringing with the undisputed authority of the Alpha King. The Van Thorn loyalists, their will completely broken, dropped their weapons. Brennan and the Stone Creek Alpha moved forward, hauling the trembling Lord Vane and the catatonic Lysara to their feet. Their reign of poison and lies was over. The punishment was swift and absolute, delivered according to the most ancient of pack laws. For treason against the Alpha and the desecration of a sacred bond, death was too merciful. At the next full moon, in a solemn ceremony before the entire pack, Lord Vane and Lysara Vanthorn were brought forth. A council of elders, with Martyr at its head, performed the ritual of severance. It was a painful, brutal magic that stripped them not of their lives, but of their wolves. Their connection to the pack, to the moon, to the very spirit that made them shifters, was torn away, leaving them as mere humans, exiled and alone. For a wolf, it was a fate worse than any death. They were cast out, their house name erased from the records, their power and status turned to ash, just as Alaric had promised. With justice served, the healing of the kingdom could begin. Selene, now universally revered as the Moon Mother, found her powers had not receded. The healing light flowed from her at will. She walked through the castle's infirmary, laying her hands on those who had been injured during the Vanthorn's desperate last stand, including the hostages. Wounds closed, fevers broke, and spirits mended under her gentle, silvery touch. She had saved Brennan from the poison, and now she saved a dozen more, her status as a figure of legend solidifying into undeniable fact. That night, in the quiet of the royal chambers, their chambers, Alaric watched her as she stood on the balcony, gazing at the moon. The city was quiet below them, the kingdom at peace for the first time in months. He came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. He breathed in her scent of moon lilies and winter frost, the fragrance that had been his only guide through the madness. "I never knew," she said softly, her hand covering his where it rested on her belly. "This power, it was sleeping inside me all along." "It was waiting for the moment we needed it most," he murmured against her hair. "Waiting for the moment our children needed you to be a queen." He turned her in his arms, his golden eyes searching her face. The burning marks on their hips, the symbols of their bond, still pulsed with a low, constant heat. The bond was restored, but it was not yet complete. There was one final step. "There is one more ritual, my love, the one that should have happened 6 months ago." He led her to the center of the room, to a soft nest of furs before the hearth. He knelt before her, his expression one of pure devotion. The Alpha King, who commanded armies and whose roar could shake mountains, made himself vulnerable, offering the most sacred part of himself to her. "Claim me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he bared his throat. "Make it complete." Selene's heart swelled. This was the final affirmation, the ultimate symbol of their union. It was not an act of dominance, but of perfect partnership. She leaned down, her lips brushing against the warm skin of his neck. She inhaled his scent of pine and winter, the scent of home. Then, with a gentle firmness, she sank her teeth into the junction of his neck and shoulder. A jolt of pure energy, white-hot and ecstatic, surged between them. It was not a pain, but a pleasure so intense it was overwhelming. She felt the bond lock into its final, permanent place. As she released him, a faint, silvery mark, a mirror of the one she now wore, bloomed on his skin. At the same moment, the burning brands on their hips cooled, transforming into intricate, beautiful silver tattoos of a crescent moon and a winter wolf intertwined. 2 halves of a soul became one. Weeks turned into months. The kingdom thrived under its new dual leadership. Alaric ruled with a strength and wisdom tempered by his ordeal, while Selene ruled with a compassion and grace that healed the divisions the Vanthorns had created. She was formally crowned queen in a ceremony that celebrated not her bloodline, but her spirit and her undeniable power. She was no longer the hidden girl from a minor house, but the radiant and powerful Alpha Queen, the Moon Mother who had saved them all. Then came the day when the future of the kingdom arrived. After a long and arduous labor, with Alaric refusing to leave her side for a single moment, Selene gave birth. not to one heir, but to two, a son and a daughter. The boy had his father's shock of black hair and his mother's calm amber eyes. The girl had her mother's silver hair and her father's brilliant molten gold eyes. They were perfect, healthy, and filled with a vibrant life force that promised a new and prosperous generation. Days later, Celine sat in a comfortable chair in the royal nursery, the afternoon sun streaming through the large windows. She held her daughter Lyra, while her son Torin slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her. Alaric stood in the doorway, simply watching them. He was not the Mad King, nor the feral Alpha, nor even the Alpha King at that moment. He was a husband and a father, his heart so full of love he thought it might burst. The hollow ache that had defined him for so long was a distant memory, replaced by a warmth and contentment so profound it was the most powerful magic of all. He crossed the room and knelt by her chair, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, then to each of their babies. Their family was complete. Their kingdom was safe. Their love had not just survived, it had conquered. And that is how the rejected servant became the Alpha Queen. Her love was a quiet power, and her heart was a hidden throne, waiting for its king to find his way home. Their story proves that you can't fight fate, and true love is a force powerful enough to bring a kingdom to its knees, and then raise it up again, stronger than before. From a broken heart to a throne. Celine's story proves that you can't fight fate. If you enjoyed this story, please hit like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to believe in happy endings.